All right, today we have Coach Tom Wilson with us. He is the head football coach at Dowling Catholic High School in West Des Moines, Iowa. Coach, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Coach. I'm doing all right. I appreciate you coming on. And Coach was gracious enough to come on and talk a little ball and talk about his program today with us. Um, and then kind of before we get started though, and we talked about a little about this before you came on. Or at least we start recording, Coach. Do you want to kind of tell coaches for who don't know who you are or don't know a lot about you about how you ended up at Dowling Catholic and kind of the road that path has taken you?
Sure. I graduated from college in 1990, and ironically enough, I applied for a position. I was an elementary teacher, and the head football coaching job was open. And at that point in time, I didn't think there was any way in the world I would get a chance to be a head coach coming out of college. But it was kind of a strange situation where it was at a very small school in Iowa, English Valleys, and in North English, Iowa, which is just outside Iowa City. The coach the year before had passed away suddenly in the middle of the season, and so things were somewhat in disarray. They really didn't have a plan for obvious reasons. And when I applied for the job, I figured it'd be one of those where they probably have somebody on staff that's going to take over the position. And ironically enough, I was wrong. And as I got into the interview, I figured out that they didn't have a plan of succession, that I was applying and interviewing for the head football job. And lo and behold, I got that. And I'm not sure I was ready. As a matter of fact, I know I wasn't. It was somewhat sink or swim at that point in time. And spent 3 years there, which was a great learning experience. We had some success. After 3 years, I moved on to another school called Wilton, which is a 2A school in Iowa. So I would say middle of the road classification wise, but a step up from where I was. Spent 2 years there, and then I got the opportunity. Bill Lynch at Ball State University took over the head football job at Ball State, and we'd kind of had a family connection through the years, and I applied to be a GA on his staff, and I took that job and left a job that I really liked, and spent 2 years at Ball State and learned a ton. I was with a great staff with a great group of people, and we were able to play in the Las Vegas Bowl during my time there. And then it was time really to make a decision whether I wanted to go down the college path or get back to the state of Iowa and be a high school coach again. And, to be honest, we felt that my wife and her dad was my head football coach in high school, and our roots were in the state of Iowa. And so we decided we would come back. It was time for us to start a family, and we wanted to do that in the state of Iowa. So then I took a job at Dike New Hartford High School, which is near Cedar Falls, or University of Northern Iowa. For those that have heard of that school, spent 8 years there, loved every minute of it. Was an elementary teacher and the head football coach, and along with some other sports. And then Dowling Catholic job came open. I was contacted about that position, and really wasn't sure that I wanted to apply. I had flirted around with a couple other jobs during my 8 years and really didn't want to go down that road again. And then got another phone call to see if I was interested, and I thought, why does it hurt to apply? And so, being a public school person my whole life that is not Catholic, I didn't really figure Dowling Catholic was going to be the fit for me. And but I went ahead, went down, applied, then got a chance to interviewed a couple times, and here we are 16 years later. At Dowling Catholic, it's been a great move for me professionally. It's a great school. There was a program that had history before I got there that had kind of dipped a couple of years prior to me getting there, and really we've had some unprecedented amount of success since then, and obviously there's an awful lot that goes into that.
Yeah, Coach, and that's kind of where I wanted to lead next. I mean, you've had some pretty good success there. What do you think? I mean, and this is a very broad question. There's about 8,000 ways you can go with this, but What do you think has kind of led to some of your success?
Well, you're right. That's very broad, and I guess to take it in steps, really one of the first things that I tried to do was assemble a staff that I felt that I trusted, and you know, I wasn't bringing anybody with me or anything like that from my previous staff. That gets really difficult to do unless you have the right teaching jobs open. But I was able to interview everybody off the staff that wanted to stay, the previous staff. I could keep who I wanted. I could bring who I wanted in. And assembling a staff, I think, was really, really critical for me. And, even that first year, I'm not sure that I was totally comfortable where we were at. And I know my AD at the time just said, let's be patient. It takes a few years to get the staff assembled that you want. And I was able to do that. And, now I can say after 16 years, we have very little turnover in our coaching staff. And most of us have been together a majority of those 16 years. And I think the other thing is really just laying the groundwork for the program. And by that, what do you want your program to stand for? And, for us, it was going to be work ethic. It was going to be accountability. Obviously, we had expectations of our kids in the weight room, and I think a lot of coaches do that. But how are you going to hold kids accountable, and how are you going to get them to be doing the things that you want them to do in order to be successful? And to me, I think it was just building the culture of hard work, of discipline, of accountability, and once we started in, and that first year we were able to go to the state semifinals, and we were beaten in a close game against our rival. I felt like we really set the foundation at that point for success. And it took us a few years longer before we got our first state championship, but I really felt early on we were able to establish what we stood for, and I think that part is still carrying on today.
Now, kind of building off that, and it kind of made me think of something here. How much has your program changed over the past 16 years? Now, I mean, and part of that is scheme oriented, but also culture oriented. How much have you changed things over the course of that 16 years?
I think it kind of varies. First thing I wanted to say was a lot. And I think part of that is I mentioned my staff, and I've got some guys that are, younger on my staff, or at least younger than I am, that I think come up with some great ideas just at being able to connect with kids. And I think we have changed that way. My philosophy was always to grind, and you had fun after you won ball games. And I think through the years, what we've found out is, as coaches, we've probably worked smarter instead of harder at this point. And I attribute my assistant coaches to that. But I think we've evolved immensely from those first few years, whether it's the style of play, whether it's how we connect with kids. But the relationships has always been really, really important to me, really important to our staff. I just think we go about things differently now. And what I mean by that is, let's take leadership, for example. I think, all of us within our programs understand how important that is, and all of us in varying degrees trying to figure out what we're going to do to teach leadership. And for us, it's things through our book reads and putting our Unity Council that we have put together. I think putting our kids in leadership roles, whether it be in our strength and conditioning, whether it be in the Unity Council that I mentioned, all of those things I think help build our culture and really help sustain things over time.
Okay, and now you mentioned book reads and Unity Councils. Let's almost start with the book reads. What book reads have you done to help develop leadership?
Through the years, we've done a variety, but really what we've stuck on the last several years now, ever since it's come out, is Chop Wood, Carry Water, and also Pound the Stone. And, what we have done in our program is big enough, and I would love to do Chop Wood, Carry Water with our freshmen, and I know some coaches do that. Really, we do it with our juniors, and then we do Pound the Stone with our seniors. And we feel like, the pandemic really screwed us up in that way, but we feel like that gives us, a true foundation of getting the kids to understand what we want, how we want them to act, how we want them to lead, and get everybody pulling in the same direction.
I love Chopwood Carry Water, Coach.
Yeah.
I had heard about it, and I'd kind of heard some things about it, and then during, I think right before COVID, so when I started, I just audiobooked it because it's just simpler while I'm doing stuff to just listen, and it's probably one of the, I don't want best books I've listened / read to ever. Like, it's just.
Yeah. I got really lucky. Matt Campbell at Iowa State, he's a big believer in Joshua Metcalf's books and the author of Chopwood Carry Water. And Metcalf was at Iowa State at one time giving a presentation to the coaching staff and also the football coaches. And, it happened to be a day that I was up visiting Iowa State, and I was able to sit in on that and just listen to him talk about his book, talk about his experiences, and how it can relate to the football team. And it was a great learning ground for me, and it's been pretty important to our program.
And then the next spot I want to go to is the Unity Councils. What does that all entail within your program?
Typically what we'll do is, and it's more of an in-season thing, we will meet with the kids once a week, and really the kids are voted upon by their peers. We will have 6 seniors, we'll have 4 juniors, we'll have 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen. And in a larger football program, we have about 200 kids, 9 through 12 for the state of Iowa. That's, a fairly good number. And the sophomores and the freshmen, they will practice, at different locations at campus, but I'm really never next to them. And what the Unity Council lets me do is to stay in touch really with all of our how our kids are feeling in our program, but with the varsity team where I spend most of my time, I have a pretty good pulse of what's going on because I'm around them day in and day out. With our sophomores and our freshmen, I'm not. I hear the coach's version of how things are going, but I oftentimes don't hear it from the kids. And so really what the Unity Council does is it allows me to get a feel for every level within our program, what is going well, what are things that we have to work on, maybe what are issues that maybe we need to address. Maybe it's just at the lower levels, maybe it's just at the varsity level, or maybe it's program-wide. But I think it gives the players a voice, and they know who's on Unity Council, and if they want to bring something to them, they can, which that doesn't often happen. But I think me as a head coach, I've learned an awful lot from these kids in the Unity Council. It's been really, really good for me over the years.
Now, I want to hit back on that because you mentioned 200 kids there. Obviously, winning helps get kids out. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I mean, especially with the success you guys have had with 8 state titles, 7 in a row. That's a big factor. I'm not going to. But what else would you attribute to getting those kind of numbers out? Because let's just be honest, those kind of numbers in any state are good.
Yeah. To be honest, I think it's about relationships. I think the kids understand that we care about them by other means than just how good they are in football. And that may sound like clinic speak, and all of us, transformational coaching is a buzzword that we hear a lot. And, as the athletic director here, I've got a little bit of control over that. And we've had every single one of our coaches trained in 3D coaching, which is really a model of teaching transformational coaching. And to us, we want to reach these kids on a whole nother level than just the sport that they play. And I think I have surrounded myself with a lot of people that believe in helping kids achieve things that they don't think is possible. And for some of them, it may be on the football field. For most of them, it won't be. But we may be the parent that some kids don't have. We may be the advocate that others don't have. And we may be the one person that applies the kick in the rear end when they need it as well. So to me, it's about how we treat our players, how we make them feel. And in the long run, that's going to help us get more kids in our program.
Yeah. And then, I mean, how do I want to word this? Because I originally was going to ask you about the importance of culture, and I think through our already 10 minutes of conversation, that's kind of obvious. How has and I kind of asked this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of morph how I asked it. In terms of culture, you mentioned 3D coaching there. Has what you use to represent your culture changed over these years in terms of, Like some coaches have like a culture playbooks, that stuff they put everywhere. Some coaches have buzzwords. Some coaches have this, have that. Like what, like combination of like what? Obviously the 3D coaching, but what else is your culture, and then how has that morphed over the 16 years?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair question, and I just think coaching in certain terms has changed some. And here I am in my early 50s, and my head coach, he just did the things he wanted you to do because he told you to do them.
Yeah.
And those days are really over. Some kids may still do that, but at the end of the day, I think you have to have a vision. You have to sell that vision, and also how you make those players feel. Do their parents trust you, and does the administration, they trust you to do your job? There's a lot of factors there. And I think we as head coaches are constantly selling our programs and how it's going to benefit that child and our team. And I think you have to approach your entire program that way. Part of it is marketing. Take social media, for example, which certainly isn't my strength, but I've got coaches that handle our team Facebook and Twitter and those types of things. And that resonates and connects with kids. And so I think that's part of something that has changed. So I think it's really evolved through the years. And I think us as veteran coaches, you can go one of two ways. No, I'm going to keep doing the things I've always done because that's all I know, or I'm going to evolve and try to connect with the kids that are, I'm not going to say they're totally different than they were back in the day, but I think identifying with them and getting to them has changed a little bit.
Okay. Now, next place I want to go is terms of staff delegation. Obviously, I'm talking to your DC about doing something for here as well. But do you call your offense, or how do you delegate stuff there and for the rest of your staff?
Yeah, I think a critical part for any head coach is to give your guys responsibility and let them do it. And just an example of that is if you take our offense, our staff is probably not divided up much different than anybody else's. But if you take our offense, I do call the offensive plays on Friday nights, but every coach in that room that has an offensive role has a say in the game plan. And that's how we go about things. Obviously, my offensive line coach, really with our running back coach, spends a lot of time looking at our run game. Our quarterback coach and our wide receiver coach spend an awful lot of time looking at our pass game, and really we come together and we put our game plan together. During the course of a ball game, they're always free to give suggestions of certain situations or certain adjustments that we have to make. As I mentioned, ultimately, I'm the one that's making the call, but I wouldn't say it's just Tom Wilson's offense. It's really everybody on our offensive staff's offense, and we're in it together. Defensively, I have had the same defensive coordinator since I got here, and he does a terrific job. He was really, really young when I hired him. He was already on staff, and he was a sophomore coach. But he's really evolved into a fantastic football coach, and we've got great coaches on the defensive side, and really that's their baby. They let me know what they're going to do. They'll explain it to me before they put the game plan in, at least what they want to do, and then I basically 9 times out of 10 say go for it. There's other times where I may have a question or two, and they tell me what they've got, and we make some decisions, and then I have co-special team coordinators, but everybody is involved. I probably am more involved in special teams than most head coaches are, but that's really the importance that I think it has in the winning of football games. But really our entire staff has a role in all of those.
Now, I mean, obviously us talking back and forth, you're a no huddle spread team at this point. When did you start running no huddle spread? Has it been like that since you've been there? And then how has that morphed since you started running it?
Yeah. Boy, there's been a lot of transformations during that time. I was basically 21 and 20 personnel prior to getting here. And really my first couple of years as the head coach, it remained that way. We would get into occasional 10 or 11, but nothing major out of it. And really what happened with us is, in our area, and as I mentioned, the first few years, we did okay. and had nice football teams at that time, but we hadn't gotten over the hump. And looking at our opponents, we were usually smaller at the line of scrimmage. We had some nice skill players. We didn't feel like we had enough depth at that time, but we felt like we had to find something to give us an advantage. And Valley of West Des Moines is our biggest rival, and they do a great job in their program. Ankeny was another at that time who, ironically enough, just won the state championship this year. Their players looked better than ours, especially at the line of scrimmage. And we felt like, okay, if we're ever going to beat them, it's not going to be in 21 personnel and banging our head against the wall all the time. So we started to evolve to an offense that we felt best fit our style and the type of players that we had. Fortunately enough, we were going to have some quarterbacks that can run and things like that. So we spent a lot of time, studying the spread. And you say the spread, and that can mean 100 different things just by that. And Ken Leonard at Sacred Heart Griffin High School in Springfield, Illinois, was a major contributor to what we do and still is, to be honest with you. And even his son, Derek, who's at Rochester High School in Indiana. So we have evolved, and we have we can change our tempos, things like that. But just because we're spread, we're still the same personnel. I mean, it may be 21, 20, a lot of 11, some 10. But we try to mix things up. But to us, we felt like we could control the tempo of the ball game, spread the field without having the biggest guys in the world. And, a few years ago, that all changed because we're basically 300 pounds across the board, and we hadn't had that since and hadn't had it before. So it's been good for us, but it evolves each and every year, basically on the talent that we have at that particular year.
Okay. And I wanted to hit on that quickly, but I want to swing back to kind of your program, because I always get interested when I start talking culture and program development. Now, obviously, with all the stuff we had to deal with this year, how did that alter your practices and your meetings with your kids, given all the COVID regulations, restrictions, all that unfortunate stuff?
Yeah, the toughest part where I felt we lost ground more than anything else was just our workouts in the spring and going into the summer. And, the gains that we've been able to make in our off season and pre-pandemic have been phenomenal. Our strength guy does an awesome job. And I think that's really where we connect with the kids on a deeper level when we're struggling together and working together. I feel like that connection is that much stronger, but we didn't get that this year. And, earlier we talked about the book reads. We didn't get to that this year just because of everything that was going on. And so we finally got to start being able to get our kids in the weight room July 1st. And, then we're starting a month later, no team camp off campus like what we've done in the past. And then we got into our camp, and really all the meetings were done virtually. We had the kids divided in pods, never had very big numbers around each other. They had their own water bottles. You're masked all the time. We had, the plastic shields and things like that on our helmets, which was obviously different. They didn't have those on. They had a mask on. Everything was different. And I think just like most programs around the country who were lucky enough to play in the fall, you just had to change basically everything that you did. All your traditions of whatever you did in the pregame in the locker room or anything like that were no longer. So it was a big change, but all of us were going through it together, and fortunately we were able to get through.
Now, you mentioned strength program there, and I've done a really bad job when I interview some of you guys asking about that. Well, first, before I get into what your strength program looks like, how much is that, because I'm always curious when coaches have been at places for a while, how much stuff's changed. And I apologize for pretty much asking a modified version of the same question over and over again. But how much has your strength program evolved, obviously with science, you've been a head coach at multiple spots, how has that evolved and improved over the course of your entire career, really?
Well, it's changed a lot because, when I first got into it, strength training was a thing, but it wasn't everything. And to me, I think it's everything in your program now, because it really builds your culture within your program, which those are the things that I think are most important. And, when I took the job here, that was my position, was the coordinator of strength and conditioning throughout the athletic department.
Okay.
And basically, we needed unification, and there's a million and one good things that you can do in athletics within your strength and conditioning, but in a high school setting, to me, you have to be unified. And if you have your football coach preaching one thing and the basketball and track coach and baseball coach or whoever preaching another, you're all working against each other. And so I spent several years as a clinician for Bigger, Faster, Stronger.
Okay.
During the early part of my career, and even at the beginning of when I was at Dowling. And that's really what I've always used. And some people may call it a canned program, but really what it's done is our core lifts and our sets and our reps, that part has not changed a bit since I got my first head coaching job in 1990 at English Valley High School. Now, the presentation of it has changed, and really where that has changed is as coaches, we've become more knowledgeable. But after 5 years as coordinating the strength and the conditioning, then I became the athletic director. At that point in time, I hired somebody to replace me that lasted a couple years, and then he took a head coaching job elsewhere. But I thought he did a good job of taking things another notch above. And then I hired Adam Jack, who I currently have now, who's been with me, pretty close to 8 to 10 years. And I think he's taken it to a whole different level. And the incorporation of things like yoga and really just the body movement. Our program hasn't changed. The buzzwords and the teaching haven't changed, but I think we've been able to supplement our strength and conditioning program to take things to a better level. And I give Coach Jack all the credit in the world for doing that.
Now, and this is kind of probably going to be the last question I'm going to ask, because I don't want to take too much of your time. And I know the Chiefs, and we have a bunch of games today, so I think we're all kind of excited for that. But there's a kind of a common theme I've noticed is, and you keep talking about evolving and learning, and sounds like from a program across the board, and I think that is a tremendous quality that more coaches should have that don't. How much do you encourage or ask your assistants to look at involving your assistants and your programs themselves, the culture, the strength, everything? How much do you encourage them or ask them to do each off season to create that evolution?
A lot, and I think that's been a big key to our success, is that just because something has worked doesn't mean something can't change. And I think that's been a secret to us, is that we've never rested on our laurels. We're always looking for what can help make us more successful. We don't feel like we have all the answers. One of the best trips that we've taken in recent years is that I took my staff out to the University of Indianapolis. My brother is the offensive line coach and the O coordinator there. We spent a day with them. Then we went to St. X in Cincinnati, spent time with them. Then we went to Miami of Ohio, spent time with them. And that's an example of everything that what we like to do in our off season is to go to a variety of places like that where we have connections, where I can handpick and I know exactly what they do offensively, defensively, special teams, cultural wise, but I know there's things I can learn from. And one of the things that I do when I hire coaches is I want to hire football junkies. I want them to constantly wanting to learn, and sometimes they may bring something to me and I think there's no way in hell we're ever going to do something like that. But at least that they are looking at things that will help make us better. And I think that's really critical. As I learned a long time ago, me as the head coach, you can't do everything. You can't be everywhere. You have to have great people around you, and people that are hungry and love the game and are passionate about kids. and I've been fortunate enough to get that here.
Well, Coach, I probably could sit here and ask you questions for the next 6 hours and still keep going because this has been fantastic. But again, I don't want to take up too much of your time. And like I said, we got a couple games on this afternoon. And for anybody listening, watching, depending on whether you're looking at this YouTube or one of the podcast apps, Coach's contact information in terms of his Twitter will be in the bio. So if you're interested in more discussion with him, please reach out to him, give him a follow, ask questions. Me and Coach have essentially gone back and forth for weeks at this point, trying to set this up and figure this out. And, so please reach out to him. Also like and subscribe. Remember that helps the channel grow, and helps people find not only this video, but other videos. And kind of remember that's kind of the point of this channel, is kind of give other coaches a platform. Coach, I want to thank you. This was a fun little conversation, and I hope you stay safe and healthy, Coach.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.